Hi, this is Kim Newlove, host of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Welcome to part one of my four-part Pharmacist Dad series. Each Friday in June 2022, I'm publishing an interview with a pharmacist dad in honor of Father's Day, which is Sunday, June 19th. If you're new to the Pharmacist Voice podcast, welcome. Again, my name is Kim Newlove, and I'm the host. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I made a career transition to voice actor and podcast host. Among other things, I narrate audiobooks for women pharmacist authors, provide medical narration to clients in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, and narrate content for explainer videos and e-learning projects. I was inspired by my nonverbal son with autism to combine my background as a pharmacist with my speaking voice and launch my business, The Pharmacist Voice, in 2017. My son Craig helped me realize the power of having a voice and using it. My solo podcast episodes are about some aspect of being a pharmacist, a voice actor, a pharmacist podcaster, or my career transition from pharmacist to voice actor and podcast host. My interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate for something, educate in some way, or entertain so that you are inspired to use your voice too. This is episode 154, and you can find the show notes with links to most of what I mentioned today on my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. Just click on the podcast tab and search for episode 154. Today's episode is an interview with Dr. Tim Ulbrich. Tim earned his Doctor of Pharmacy degree from Ohio Northern University and completed a postgraduate residency training at The Ohio State University. During our interview, Tim talks about how he has used his voice as a pharmacist after his residency. He has done a number of things. Tim is also the co-founder and CEO of Your Financial Pharmacist, also known as YFP. Founded in 2015, YFP is a fee-only financial planning firm and connects with the YFP community of more than 13,000 pharmacy professionals via the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast, blog, website resources, and speaking engagements. To date, YFP has partnered with more than 70 pharmacy organizations to provide personal finance education on topics including debt management, investing, retirement planning, and financial well-being. Tim is also the host of Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast and co-author of Seven Figure Pharmacist: How to Maximize Your Income, Eliminate Debt, and Create Wealth. The first half of this episode is about how Tim uses his voice as a pharmacist. The second half focuses on Tim's role as a dad. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Tim Ulbrich. Hi, Tim. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm well, Kim. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. You're part of my Pharmacist Dad series. Happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we're going to talk about two things today: how you use your voice as a pharmacist and how you use your voice as a dad. So let's get started with the pharmacist part. Who are you and what do you do with your voice as a pharmacist?
Who am I? That's a big question. I think I'm still trying to figure that out, Kim, to be honest. So as a pharmacist, so I graduated from Ohio Northern University in 2008. I went to a 06 PharmD program out of high school with really no clue of whether or not pharmacy was going to be for me. I mean, let's be honest, what 18-year-old does know if pharmacy is going to be the right career path? And really fell in love with the profession during my final year of pharmacy school. I had thought I was going to go a hospital administration route. I had some mentors kind of encouraging me in that area. And then I went on a really life-changing rotation. Just a few weeks after I got married in my P6 year, my final year, I went on a 3-week rotation to Kenya. And as I think those experiences, certainly can change perspective and disrupt things a little bit, I came back and I was like, you know what? Like, I don't think this path is for me. And at the time I thought I was going to be doing residency and had this very scripted path of what the future may be. And I just felt like I was burned out and kind of ready to move on and go to a different path. Lo and behold, I had a great mentor of mine, Mary Alice Bennett, who's a pharmacy icon here in Ohio and is well known nationally for her work in leadership and community pharmacy practice. And she said, Tim, I think we need to talk. I think we need to talk about, kind of what decisions you're making and what state of mind you're in, and what does, the future hold. And so long story short, I ended up going to Ohio State to do my community residency with a focus in academia, fell in love with the teaching side, which is not something I had anticipated as a potential career path. And from there, went on to an academic role where I spent part of my time in practice, part of my time teaching up at Northeast Ohio Medical University in Akron, Cleveland area. Spent about 10 years there in various roles in student affairs, more academic administration, and then came back to Ohio State in 2018 to lead the Master's in Health System Pharmacy Administration program for a few years before I then left to work full-time on the business, which is Your Financial Pharmacist. So somewhat of a curvy, nonlinear career path. I think looking backwards, so many of the experiences, even that I had in academia, have really prepared me for the work that I'm now doing and running my own business. I couldn't see it at the time. I don't think all the stars aligned in the moment, but really found myself in several instances within academia trying to launch new initiatives and services. Sometimes that was a new course, sometimes that was a new residency program. We actually launched a business while I was at Northeast Ohio Medical University focused on medication management with employers or other things. And finally, I had a mentor of mine that said, Tim, really what you're doing is like academic entrepreneurship. And I remember thinking, those terms do not go together, academia and entrepreneurship. But it was really a light bulb moment for me because I had grown up in small business. My grandfather owned a nursery farm that my dad then took over and launched some other businesses himself as well. Always had an interest in this area, but it wasn't until some time where those dots started to connect of how I could pursue that interest in entrepreneurship, but my background in pharmacy. And so long story short, the work that I do now with Your Financial Pharmacist and my partner, Tim Baker, who's a certified financial planner, and we've got a team that works with us, is really focused on helping pharmacists achieve financial freedom. And we can talk more about that backstory that comes from a lot of personal financial pain and mistakes along the way, and really seeing an opportunity to impact the profession in a non-traditional way. And I think, if I'm honest with myself, what I've ever thought, hey, I'm going to go obtain a pharmacy degree, I'm going to go do residency training, and then I'm going to step into a field where neither of those degrees are required or credentials. No, I wouldn't have thought about that, right? Probably could be argued that would be a terrible ROI on your educational costs. But so much of that work and training really led me to not only my own journey, but seeing the opportunity for the need that was out there to have a financially well pharmacist workforce. And that really is the center of everything that we do at YFP.
I love your podcast too, by the way. I think that you extend your reach by having a podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about the podcast?
Yeah, that has been such a fun journey. We are now launching 3 shows per week on the YFP podcast channel. It started as one show in July of 2017. I think July 2nd of 2017 was our first episode. And we just crossed 1 million downloads, which is a really cool mark for us in terms of the growth and the impact that the show has had. But I remember specifically when Tim Baker and I, my partner, met and we said, hey, let's launch a podcast on personal finance. And I remember we had thoughts of, yeah, we should do this. Let's kind of jump in. We'll figure it out. But like, what are we going to talk about? And how long will this go on? And I remember hearing stats like the average podcast lasts 7 episodes, those types of things. And we just jumped in and said, hey, let's figure it out as we go. And so, we identified, I think, the first 5 or so episodes that we were going to talk about. We had a running list of ideas. And to this day, I think we're now more than 400 episodes in across the 3 shows. To this day, there is a list of episodes and ideas that continues to get longer and longer. And I often think, like, are we going to run out of ideas? And I think the answer is no, because so much of the financial space, there's always an opportunity for repetition. I've experienced that personally, where I need to hear a topic over and over, or be reminded of it, or presented in a different way. And there's always more stories that need to be shared. There's always more stories that need to be shared. And we have pharmacists regularly reaching out to us saying, hey, Tim, I just learned this. I went through this journey. We accomplished this goal. starting this business. And thankfully, these folks are often interested in sharing their story on the podcast. And I think one of the aha moments we had in the show is, really YFP and really the voice of the podcast is us to be a facilitator of developing a community of pharmacists that are interested and empowered on this topic of financial freedom. And really, it's not just about us talking about boring financial stuff, right? We can do that, and there's a place for that. But we all know from personal experience, we learn better through stories of other people. And so that was a shift, I would say, a focus of the show after the first 100 or so episodes was, let's be more of a facilitator of this community and less of the person that is on the stage always talking about certain topics. Number one, it takes the pressure off. Number two, I think it makes the content better. And number three, I think it's more motivating, for other people to hear other stories or to say, yeah, that's me. I resonate with that. And it's great to hear another pharmacist who's also going in that journey. So current state is we've got 3 shows we launch. We have a Ask a YFP CFP segment we launch every Monday morning, which is intended to be a short question that we answer from a community member that I bring on Tim Baker, one of our lead financial planners, to get a quick question answered and to really feature the planning team and the expertise they bring. We then do our main show or the original show. We do that on Thursdays. And then our newest show is we have a real estate investing podcast that we launched on Saturday mornings that we're just now over 50 episodes in that David Bright and Nate Hedrick, 2 pharmacist real estate investors, are co-hosting that show. So it's been an evolution, but without taking that first step, I think like many things, we would have never been comfortable in expanding and growing. And we had so many questions early on about like, how do we do this? What's the right equipment? And, how are we going to host this? And how are we going to share this? And I think some of those technical barriers for many can be paralyzing to getting started. And we just said, hey, let's jump in. It's not going to be perfect. And I even recently listened to episode 1 and I was like, ugh, like that wasn't, the best stuff that we put out. And I'm hopeful I'll say the same thing at episode 600, right? Where we look back and say, we're continuously trying to get better and improve as we understand the content that means the most to our community. So that channel for us, the podcast, as we look at the business as a whole, it's our number one source of referrals from a financial planning service standpoint. And I think the reason that is, and you can give me some insights here. I think the reason that is that people resonate with the voice and the connection that comes through the podcast. And there's a relationship that's being built there over a period of time. So we often hear from folks that say, hey, Tim, I've been listening to the show for 2.5 years. And certainly that's flattering and that's really exciting. And then all of a sudden something happens, right? It could be that, someone's getting married. It could be that they've had a significant life event that happened and they really identify there's a need for them for one-on-one planning. And that relationship that's been built, even though, I may or may not know that person personally, that we've been having this conversation when they're driving or running or whatever. And I think especially with the financial topic, it brings comfort. There's vulnerability, right? That's needed when we talk about personal finance. And I think developing that rapport and relationship through the voice in the podcast goes way farther than a blog or other content, especially on the financial topic. So our intent, I can't say from the get-go, was that we would launch this podcast and it would be our primary referral source for financial planning clients. But that is what we continue to see, is that it's not even close, that really is the main driver in terms of our community growth and building our client base.
That is awesome. That is a powerful story of how your voice has helped your business. That's amazing. Yeah. And it's not just your voice, the voices of others.
That's right. And it's scary. I mean, I'll be honest, and I suspect many folks may be listening to your show and thinking, I've got this idea and I'm not sure, what happens when I put my name out there, right? All these fears come, creeping to the surface. And I think we sometimes lean on those fears and those objections and, the technical things of, well, I'm not comfortable. So not now, but I'll get to that later. And, there's always going to be wrinkles. It's always going to be messy. If we're too hard on ourselves, it's going to be a painful experience. But my challenge to folks would be, what opportunities are out there? What do you have to share that I believe firmly, if somebody has a great idea that they're providing a solution to a problem that people care about, you have a responsibility to get that information out there. And maybe it's a business, maybe it's not, maybe it evolves to that, maybe it doesn't. But if you truly have a solution to a problem that people have, podcasts, I think, is one way. There certainly are other mediums to do it, but I think it's so powerful to be able to develop that relationship with somebody, over the waves of the podcast. I can think of many shows I listen to where I've never met individuals that host the show, but I feel connected to them because I regularly listen and their voice is in my ear.
Absolutely. Boy, you made a lot of great points. And I want to start off by saying congratulations on 1 million downloads. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
Can you just think of how many people you're helping and you don't even know it? That's awesome.
It's a really cool feeling. Kim, one of the thoughts I had this past week is if I go in to speak into a room of 200 or 300 pharmacists, the honor of doing that is really incredible. And I hope I never lose that feeling of 200 or 300 people, whether it's live or on a webinar, have given up their time, which we know is precious, to sit down and to listen and to hopefully be motivated and take some action in their life. That's an incredible honor and an incredible responsibility. And I would encourage folks, as I look at 50 something thousand downloads in a month, if you envision those people as being people that are sitting in the room listening to a presentation, that's an incredible honor and an incredible responsibility, right? Both of those come with it. And I think that the podcast maybe takes some of that weight or fear, especially if folks aren't comfortable in that environment, to get started. Because if you were to say, hey, you're going to speak, you're going to put this out and 3,000 people are going to listen, right? People would get really scared. But if you're having a conversation like
there's
we're
a
having,
moment. There's a moment. Yes.
There's a moment. But I think, the opportunity to have that impact and the opportunity for folks, that give up time to listen is something that I will forever be grateful for.
I love your gratitude. That's awesome. You talked a little bit about having a community, and those are the people that come to you with their stories. Can you talk a little bit about where is this community? Where can people find it?
Yeah, kind of a nebulous concept, right? I was a firm believer pretty early on in the business that we needed to be a facilitator of this community of pharmacists all across the country that were on this mission towards financial wellness. And I firmly believe that that is the path that we're on. There's 320,000 pharmacists that are out there in the country. I think a decent chunk of those know who we are and what we do, but we still have a lot of work to go. And I so firmly believe in the need for a financially well pharmacist workforce that mission really drives me to want to get as many people involved in the community as possible. So when I say community, that really is multi-pronged. We've got a very active listenership on the podcast. We've got a very active Facebook group of about 7,000 pharmacists that are constantly sharing, hey, I've got this question. What do you think? Or I've got this challenge. I've got this win to share. That's probably the most tangible example I can give, where that feeling when, early on, somebody would post a question, I'd respond the answer. Now somebody posts a question and like 15, 20 people are engaging and responding to provide different ideas. That is community, right? Other people helping one another, challenging one another, supporting one another. And we YFP are the facilitator of that. We are not the center stage of all of that happening. And I think as I think about the transformation and the growth of the business and really scaling the potential that we can have and wanting to leave the dent on the profession that I think is needed, we can't be the center of that conversation. We must be the facilitator of that. And so I think right now it's building the community of people that care about this topic and giving them the outlets to communicate with one another, to encourage and motivate, inspire one another. Ideas we have for the future would be rallying that community around some advocacy topics. So I think we've got work to do on things like making sure we have personal finance education in the PharmD program. Perhaps there's opportunities at a state, legislative, or national level to advocate for personal finance, financial wellness. Well, we can activate the community right around those. Other examples is that we're beginning some work on the concept of YFP Gives, which would be an opportunity for folks to, from a philanthropic standpoint, be able to give to causes that other pharmacists are involved with in the community. So again, this concept of building this group, this community of people that care about this topic of financial wellness and us really being the facilitator of that conversation.
I think the community aspect on Facebook is incredibly important because I think it's something that a lot of us of a certain age are familiar with, and having a place to go to, and like you said, share your problems, seek solutions from
Hmm.
others who are like minded. That's very important. And I would love to put a link to that in the show notes. So I'll have you send that to me.
Sure, will do. Thank you.
And hey, that's great information to share on your podcast too. And I'm sure that's where you get ideas for your podcast and the people that you invite to be on your podcast too, right?
It is, so many of the podcast ideas have come from questions or engagement in the community. I always tell folks the best content that we can produce are when I see repetition of questions or comments. So if we have clients that are all coming asking a similar question, or we have people in the Facebook group that are asking a question, or we see a lot of engagement on a post, that probably tells me that there's a need for more information in that area. So yeah, certainly some ideas we'll come up with organically, but many of the ideas of the content that we have out there have come from the community, whether or not they know it, but they've come from the community and that they have stimulated a conversation, or they've asked a question and others are, oh yeah, me too, me too, me too, me too, right? Which I think in finance is so important because while we've made a lot of progress, it's still somewhat of a taboo topic. And so I think one of the benefits of that community aspect is it helps bring a avenue together where folks can be vulnerable, but it's in a safe, non-threatening space. And I think as more folks, share, then obviously others will do the same. And that is where many of our ideas have come from content.
Being vulnerable is not something pharmacists always want to do. Thank you for the invitation to be
Yeah,
vulnerable on your Facebook group. I know I
absolutely.
certainly would be. I've had a very different path, and I believe you and I are going to have a conversation for your podcast later on this year. And
Yes.
I would love to share my path.
Looking
But
forward to it.
the reason that I asked about people sharing on the Facebook group and it becoming the topic for a podcast is that I love to reverse engineer things. And I don't know if this is what all pharmacists do, but I love to reverse engineer things. And when I think about you having an episode on a topic that has touched the lives of your Facebook community, I think, oh, if I want to become a member of that community, I'm going to research that topic in that search button or that search
Hmm.
bar, that little
Hmm.
magnifying glass on the Facebook group, and just see what other people are talking about. Because, yeah, we get your thoughts, Tim, and they're fantastic. But what are other people seeing? What are they experiencing? You get that benefit too. So I bring this up because of the reverse engineering angle too. I don't know if other people think this way, but the value of your podcast is for the listener. You're not up there talking
That's
just to
right.
talk. You
Yep.
really want to help people, and you can help more people when they think like me.
Yes, facilitator, right? That's the word I keep going back to, that I'm a facilitator for the community. And let me give an example of that. Is we recently launched an episode where we featured 3 pharmacists that collectively had more than $700,000 that was forgiven tax-free under the federal loan forgiveness program. And that was not a journey that I went through. And so that was a great example where, yes, I could talk about the loan forgiveness program. We could talk about the X's and the O's and why you need to cross, your T's and dot your I's. And we've done that. But the value that has come out from, oh, like I heard from Kim, Kyle, and Ashley, and I can see myself in their shoes, or they answered a question that I have, or they lived it, right? I did not live it in terms of going through that loan forgiveness program. So I think again that facilitation and bringing other voices into your community, into your content, can be so powerful in terms of other examples that your community can see.
Absolutely. Stories are powerful. And in my opinion, stories about transformation, going from broke to debt free, is
Hmm.
huge. And what's even bigger is when the stories about how you, Tim, how your financial pharmacist as a business helped them do that. There's a lot of value for the listener, but then it's got to be gratifying for you to hear that you helped that particular person do that. It kind of puts gas in your tank.
It really does. And, I actually had a mentor of mine recently recommend to me to not, one of the things I think is you're growing a business, and especially when you're in the thick of it, is there are highs, there are lows. And it can quickly become self-absorbing if you're not careful. And you can quickly lose that bigger picture of why you're doing what you're doing. And one of my
Mhm.
mentors recently, because we'll get emails pretty often that say, "Hey, I listened to this episode," or I heard you speak, or I heard from so and so, and this transformation happened. And I've had to be really intentional about like stopping in the moment, like treasuring that moment and thinking about all of the effort and the work, not me, but the team at large over several years that led to that one moment and how transformational that moment can be for someone going forward. We had a pharmacist recently reach out that said, after listening to the podcast over several years and kind of busting their butt and working some extra hours, they are able to pay off $180,000 of student loans so that they're debt free. And that now they're able to work on a business and do some other things from that. Like, that is incredible. Like, that is absolutely incredible. And I think to stop, and one of the exercises I started doing that was recommended by a mentor of mine was to actually record those testimonials and build it into like an affirmations visualization exercise that I do each morning. And that has been incredibly powerful, just to have that daily reminder of who are we as a company? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what's the impact? And, it's not about building ego. Certainly those feel good. But it's about the reminder of what are we trying to accomplish and why are we as a team so committed to this mission? And that has been a really powerful exercise to do every day.
I love that. I love the place you're coming from with that, the humble place that you're coming from, because it's not that you're seeking credit for facilitating the transformation. It's that you just want to remind yourself that the transformation happened.
That's
And I
right.
think that's a beautiful thing to do.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Hillary Blackburn actually has what she calls a hero file. I believe it's Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about how sometimes she needs a reminder of why she's doing her podcast or why she does what she does. And she'll open up that hero file and she'll read those messages. And that just puts gas in her tank
Mm-hmm.
and it fuels her to do more. And it also reminds, now, separate from Hillary, that would remind me, if that was my hero file, that would remind me that I'm really the guide with a plan.
That's
I'm
right.
not the hero. The people who are doing the work and making the transformation are the heroes, and we are just the guides. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I would recommend a book that really helped me solidify this concept by Donald Miller. It's called Story Brand by Donald Miller. He talks about this concept of facilitation and really you are the guide to the transformation. And this gets really practical. Like when you go to the website, our website, it's not Tim and my story. It was early on because that was the point of reference and the framework I had. But it's about the transformation and stories of other pharmacists as a result, in part due to the community and due to the team and the efforts that have been had. So that book and resource, I think, really helped me solidify that idea a little bit further and to have some tactical strategies of how to implement that. So that may be of help to some of the listeners.
Absolutely. I would second that remark. I love that book, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Excellent book. And I just think you're a really great example of being a guide with a plan, and you've led to all these transformations. And I think that there's a remark in the book about creating passionate brand enthusiasts.
Mm.
There are people that just absolutely love Your Financial Pharmacist because you've helped them lift this huge burden and achieve financial freedom. So congratulations on all your success. And I would love to move on to your success as a dad at this point. Would that be all right?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
What's your family like?
This really means a lot to me, Kim, because it's something I don't get to talk to enough, but is so near and dear to me and I think our story and everything that we've been working on as well. So my wife, Jess, and I, let's start there. That's most important before I talk about my boys. My wife, Jess, and I met at Ohio Northern University. We actually met while we were training to be RAs in one of the dorms at Ohio Northern University. So this was between our freshman and sophomore year, and she was studying in public relations. I was studying, obviously, in pharmacy. And long story short, we ended up getting married during my final year of pharmacy school. And I was actually just giving her a hard time the other day. The only C I ever got in pharmacy school was in organic chemistry the semester I met her. So I put that blame on her for the only C that I ever got at College of Pharmacy. So we got married my final year of pharmacy school. We were 23, I believe, at the time, 24. And we had our first son, Samuel, who's now going to be turning 11 here pretty soon, in August of 2011. So we have 4 boys, which is incredible and crazy all at the same time. So my oldest is Samuel. He's almost 11. My second son, Everett, he is 9. My third son, Levi, is 7. And our youngest, Bennett, is going to be turning 3 here in a little bit. So we've got 3 that are relatively close. And then we've got our youngest. My wife homeschools our 3 older boys. Our youngest is really just kind of making the whole homeschooling thing pretty messy right now in terms of stirring the pot with his older brothers. But that's been an incredible blessing and journey and a good fit for our family. So that's a little bit about who we are as a family. And I would have never imagined being a father to 4 boys. And what a gift and challenge. And, some days I feel like I get it right. Other days I don't. It's one of I always say business and fatherhood. I would add marriage in there too. Business, fatherhood, and marriage, I think, are the 3 greatest learning grounds that I have had. And I think fatherhood specifically, I've always shared that any weakness I have that was perhaps unexposed or I had done a good job of keeping tampered has gotten exposed and magnified in fatherhood. And I think it's just been such an incredible growth opportunity for me individually, and to really learn both grace for myself individually, grace for Jess and I, and then obviously great grace for our boys as well. So it's been a wild journey for sure, but it's been amazing.
Well, congratulations on your 4, I'm sure, very healthy and rambunctious boys. And
Rambunctious,
how
yes.
wonderful that your wife can do the homeschooling. That's amazing. I don't know you, Jess, but you are a saint.
She is a saint. She is a saint. Yeah. It's a journey. One of the, we've always kind of gone into that journey of, if it works for us as a family, great. If we see at a certain point it doesn't for one or all of our kids, like that's okay as well. I feel like for every family, there's an individual journey and decision to be made of parenting, of schooling, right? Of all types of decisions that we make. And that has just been an incredible gift of, her being home and being able to be flexible with how she's approaching the education with the boys. I will say, and I have no problem in the humility and admitting that I would not be capable of doing what she does each and every day in terms of, 4 learners that are at all different levels that all learn different ways. And I think the nimbleness and flexibility that is needed to be able to really shepherd that forward when you have different levels and different learning styles is just an amazing gift that she has. And I'm so grateful for that.
Awesome. I can't say enough about people that homeschool their kids. I'm not going to go down that path too much, but I don't do it myself. But I do have a lot of mom friends that do that. And as their kids get older, they enter co-ops because
Mm-hmm.
not everybody has the same level. I'm just going to leave it at that. I give your family a lot of credit. So way to go. And like you said, it's an individual journey.
That's right. Absolutely.
Also an individual journey is trying to figure out when to start a family. So I want to ask, how did you and Jess determine when to start a family?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we met at Ohio Northern, there was this pond around Ohio Northern that we would just walk circles around, and we would have hour, 2 hour, 3 hour long conversations about all types of topics. I remember we'd talk about, marriage and family and ideas that we had. This was back in the day of AOL Instant Messenger, so like in the dorm room, like AIM message, hey, you want to go for a walk, right? Those types of things. And so I think it was always on our radar that we wanted to start a family pretty soon. We had a couple miscarriages early on before our oldest son, Samuel, was born. And so, there was this period of time of, is this dream of a family going to be possible? And that was a really difficult season for us. And, I think one of the things that many folks who have gone through that journey know is that it's much more common than people think, but you don't sense that or feel that in the moment until you start sharing some of that information, and then other folks tend to share as well, and you start to feel a sense of community in that journey as well. So thankfully, by the grace of God, we were able to have our son Samuel, who is healthy, and our other 3 boys since then. But that was always a journey for us. Now I will say that as I look back now and I can think about all of the things that you'd want to be prepared for in having kids, whether it's the home, whether it's the finances, whether, it might be the debt, or we at the right place to do this. Like, I'm glad we weren't thinking of all those things, because I don't know if we would have made that decision forward. And I think there is a certain level of trust and figure it out factor, to really be able to be comfortable, because, as other people have said, I'm sure there's never the perfect time, to have a child. And I think depending on the mindset and the viewpoint that you have, obviously there's just so much to figure out, both in parenting, with one another, in marriage, and obviously the change that comes there. And then, of course, all of the other opportunities and challenges that a child can bring, whether that be financial or others as well. So it was always a goal of ours. It was always something we had envisioned. So we had our oldest son, Samuel, at the age of 27. And our youngest, Ben, who will almost be 3. We had him when we were 34. So, pretty substantial range in between our oldest and our youngest, but it was always something that was at the forefront of our mind for our family.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing all that. I think that miscarriages are certainly not expected. I think we can agree on that. And I'm sorry that you experienced that, but it makes that all that much sweeter when we
Mm-hmm.
have our live births and healthy children.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you for being vulnerable. There's got to be at least one or two other dads listening to this that's shaking their head or nodding their head and saying, "Yep, yep, I'm with you on that." And there's a lot of dads to be that may not even think about, "Hey, that might happen to me." So revealing
Mm-hmm.
that, it has value. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Now, a little bit happier topic here. What is your very most favorite thing about being a dad?
Wow, there's so much. And one of the things I've come to appreciate, is how different my 4 boys are. And I know other parents say this, and it's something you can try to be prepared for, but you just can't until you experience it. And you think, man, they all were raised in the same house. They came from the same mom and dad, but the variance of the gifts that they've been given, the challenges and the opportunities that are there, is, I think, just such a fun thing to experience. My oldest, Samuel, is very athletic. He's very oldest child, type A. We probably instilled a lot of that in him, whether we realize it or not. He's going to be following the rules. He's going to follow the textbook, which I think is certainly a positive in some areas, but could be a challenge in terms of teaching him that it's okay to be flexible and make mistakes and all those things as well. Our second son is like the complete opposite of him. I mean, very creative, has talents in the arts that, like, I never could appreciate or understand based on my background and gifts. And my wife's ability to, like, let that flourish and to give him experiences, and really to do that across all the 4 boys, has been just such a rewarding experience. For me personally, I love being able to try to identify, with Jess, like, what are those things that you see them start to identify their zone of genius. And, I remember one conversation I had with my second son, Everett, recently. We were in the car. I think we were driving to the grocery store. It was just me and him, which one-on-one time with them is just such a gift when it happens. And I think we have been trying to affirm him in some of the creativity. He's been, like, writing lyrics and doing some other things, and just trying to really get him to understand, like, hey, you really have been given a gift that is unique, to you, and to really treasure that and to lean into that. And we were riding in the car, and he said something along the lines of, like, my creativity is like my superpower. And I was like, yes, yes, like, yes. And I think, like, to be able to identify in them, like, what is their zone of genius? Like, what is the unique gift or gifts that they've been given? And how can we as parents put them in the scenarios? And really, it goes back to what we were talking about of facilitating, right? How can I, as a father, how can Jess and I as parents be a facilitator to their growth and their development, to help them flourish and to be everything that they were designed to be? And I think that opportunity is just such a gift. It certainly is humbling to be able to be in that position to try to figure it out. But it also comes with great responsibility of, as parents, there are, every day we're stepping in it and making mistakes, whether that's because of, it was a long day, we're too busy, we're trying to do the best that we can with 4. And if we're not careful, like, we can start to step on those gifts and those confidence that they have in certain areas. And, I think that challenge and again, grace and humility that can come in the process is so important. But my favorite moment, because it was unexpected, I didn't think about going into fatherhood, is, how can I help facilitate, help them identify what are some of the gifts that they've been given, and how can we as parents help put them in opportunities to thrive?
I think you covered favorite things and challenges at the same time. Thank you for sharing all of that. That was brilliant. At the same time, though, I've got to ask, is there one thing that you can think of as being the most challenging thing about being a dad? I know you already mentioned some challenges, but I'm going to challenge you to bring on some more, Tim.
Yeah, that for me is easy, Kim. I think I've more and more identified that just being present mentally is a constant struggle and challenge for me. I tend to be a very achievement focused, forward thinking, what's next, what could have been done better in the past, and really trying to teach myself, train myself of the moment in front of me, the time that I have with them. If I'm conversing with them at dinner, or we're playing, like, am I fully present, looking in their eyes only in that moment? And that is a rare thing, for me. I'm getting a little bit better with each month or each year. But I would say that is an uphill battle for me to truly be present in the moment with them and the time that they have and the time that we have together. And I'm starting to feel that sense of, okay, I've got, soon to be 11-year-old. I've got a 3-year-old who still is very much the baby. But I can start to see my oldest going into that pre-adolescent phase. And you start to see that time of both influence and time together. I certainly still have a lot of it with our 4 boys, but it's shrinking, right? It's shrinking. And I think that feeling of, am I present, and what can I be doing to get present, or to give myself a better chance to be present? So, simple practices that, end of the day, it could be a 10-minute meditation or prayer to have a very symbolic transition point of, I'm going from work to home, making sure that I'm, putting my phone away. Weekends, I'm not working. Evenings, I'm not, those types of things. But it's been, to be frank, it's been a grind. And there's times where I feel like I'm taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But as I zoom out over now a decade, like through that grind and through the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I see a significant change over 10 years in my ability to be present. Still have a long way to go, but from where I was, but in the moment, it doesn't necessarily always feel like that. And so I think having some of the systems in place, having some of the accountability from Jess and other people in my life to remind me of that has been really important. But presence for me has been the biggest challenge.
This is stuff that I think prospective and current dads need to hear. And also, I think it helps us, as I know I'm not a dad, but as parents, I think it helps us understand our parents and the choices they made,
Mhm.
because the struggle is real.
It is. It is absolutely. One of the gifts that's come recently is, I've always had a good relationship with my father, but I've been trying to be much more intentional, as he has, of flourishing that relationship for the reason you just mentioned. Is like, I've come to really appreciate, the job that my parents did as parents. They would be the first to admit that they gave it their best, and many times they got it right. Sometimes they didn't. But that's so refreshing in the moment while I'm in the thick of it, right, with my own boys, to be able to have those conversations with my dad, who's now looking back, obviously on raising me and my brother, but also is looking at it through the lens of being a grandparent. I think one of the gifts of being a grandparent is you almost get a second chance, right? You almost get a second chance to do things a different way. And so, fostering and developing that relationship with my father further, I think, has been a real gift of being able to also, parent and raise my boys.
Tim, thanks for sharing some of those struggles and challenges. One of the things that I picked up on was the balance of work and family. Can you tell me a little bit about, I know you've already talked about the accountability from Jess and, your
Mhm.
children just asking for that attention, but can you tell me, do you have any secrets for how to successfully balance work and family?
Yeah, this has definitely been a thing in progress. I will say, pretty early on, I've tried to draw a line, because I know for me, based on my personality, if it's not black and white, it's going to keep creeping and creeping and creeping. So, outside of, I'll do a presentation, once a week. I hold Tuesday nights where I have any presentation, webinar, or podcast recording in the evenings. But any other evening of the week, outside of a rare exception, after 5 o'clock, I'm not working. And then on the weekends, outside of a presentation here or there, I'm not working on the weekends either. So, that's been a really important kind of blocking of time for me to set the guardrails and the barriers. Obviously, Jess and I communicating and being able to schedule all those things. And then I think for me, while that blocking has been real important, for me, the morning routine is an absolute must, non-negotiable. So I've developed over 5 to 7 years now. It continues to evolve, but about an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning, where when I'm doing it right, I need that time to get my mind set and right to bring my best version of myself at work, to my team, to obviously the community, what we're building, to Jess and to our family. And that includes, a combination of some devotional and prayers, some walking, some exercising, some gratitude journaling, some affirmations. There's lots of resources that talk about this. And that has been key. And it may not seem like an obvious link to like evening and weekend time with the boys, but it is, because that 6 to 8 a.m. is setting the foundation for the entire day. So two things I would mention would be the time blocking, just overall, protecting the evenings and the weekends. And then that morning routine has been a non-negotiable for me.
Wow, great advice there. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure that many dads out there will find this, or prospective dads will find this very valuable. What advice do you have for current or prospective pharmacist dads that you haven't already covered today?
Ooh, that's a good one. Lots of things. If I had to only give one, I think for those that are in a relationship with someone else where you're going to be doing this together, whether that's in the future or you're in the thick of it right now, would be to really prioritize the core of that relationship. One of the things that Jess and I often talk about, and I'm so grateful for our relationship, is that there are certainly seasons that are challenging, seasons that are very rewarding. But at the end of the day, like, we both carry a strong mutual respect for one another. We both value the role that we're playing in our family. And we just genuinely do enjoy spending time together, whether that's walking, whether that's, sitting on the couch, we're both reading a book, we're not talking, but we're together as two introverts. And I think that core of that relationship is, I think, so centered to what we're able to bring to the boys and to obviously their development and, the family and the environment that we have at home. And so I couldn't imagine obviously doing it without her, but just a constant investment in one another and the constant need to show appreciation and gratitude for one another, I think, is so important for individuals that are going to be doing this together.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I couldn't agree more. Having that person that's still engaged with you, like wants to spend time with you and you want to spend time with them, and just, improve and deepen that relationship over time. That's fantastic advice.
In the good and bad, Kim, I think that there are nights where, our boys will finally all get to bed and the house is eerily quiet. And there are nights where, we're treasuring the stories of the day and, the development of the boys, and this happened, that happened. There are other nights where we're like, that was a complete train wreck and we need to do better tomorrow. But to have the ability to do that together and to extend grace to one another, in those moments is just so important. So, I think the journey, both the good, both the challenging as well, to be able to share that with someone else is incredible.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I'm trying not to laugh during that whole train wreck comment, because I've had days like that too. But you can laugh at it looking back, and then you forget about it. And that's how you end up with kid number 2 and 3.
That is right.
Yes. It's not all picture perfect. Everything's not on the highlight reel when you're a parent. You heard it here first. But anyways, Tim, thank you so much for sharing about how you use your voice as a pharmacist and as a dad. And I'd like to invite you to share any links or websites that you might want listeners to visit.
That's great. Thanks, Kim, for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure to be on the show. Folks can connect with me on LinkedIn. And then if they're not familiar yet with the work we're doing at Your Financial Pharmacist, you can just go to yourfinancialpharmacist.com. So thanks again for having me on the show.
My pleasure. All right. Well, happy Father's Day to you, Tim, and have a great summer.
Thank you so much, Kim.
I'd like to share just a few final thoughts with you. First of all, Many of the pharmacist entrepreneurs that I have had the pleasure of interviewing for my podcast have had some twisty, windy paths to entrepreneurship, and Tim is certainly one of them too, and he is doing really well as an entrepreneur. Second, I want to ask you a question. Do you have the solution to a problem that people care about? Like Tim said, if you have the solution to a problem that people care about, you have a responsibility to get that information out there. It's up to you if you take that challenge and run with it. If you're interested in becoming an entrepreneur, I hope Tim inspired you to take action. My third and final point is about podcasting. Tim mentioned that YFP's number one source of referrals from a financial planning service standpoint is Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. That was so cool to hear that. It's a relationship building tool. It's an opportunity for him to build rapport and relationships with his listeners so that taking the leap as a client to having an initial conversation or becoming a client is a comfortable transition. Listening to a podcast is a warmer connection than reading a blog. If you have an interest in starting a podcast, I hope Tim's success with podcasting inspires you to use your voice as a podcaster too. That's all I've got for you today. In the show notes, you will find a link to Dr. Tim Ulbrich's LinkedIn profile, YFP Podcasts, and the YFP Facebook group. Plus, you'll see a link to his business website, the Seven Figure Pharmacist book, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, and more. Let me wrap this up by saying thank you for listening to episode 154 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes and check out all those links. If you know someone who would like this episode or needs to hear it, please share it with them and subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Join me next week for part 2 of my Pharmacist Dad series. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, and thank you again for listening.